In this video, I'll be doing a deep dive into how DateTime works in Dataverse and Power Apps. This will be an advanced review of this topic. DateTime can be a complicated feature to configure correctly. The output of DateTime can vary depending on your column settings and, in some cases, your app setting. This video covers how DateTime behaves on the back end so you can better understand how the data is displayed in your apps. I'll be talking about how Dataverse stores date and time, how Power Apps submit date and time, and then show end-to-end scenarios to help you understand how the data is displayed. So let's dive in. Date time depends on three factors for its behavior. Storage, which is how Dataverse stores the time. Submission may apply additional logic when submitting from the UI. And retrieval. Logic is applied based on how the data is stored. To get the best results, you need to know your goal. Do you want to store and retrieve the value exactly as it was submitted, or do you expect it to be calculated for display in the user's local time? First, it helps to understand UTC time. UTC stands for Coordinated Universal Time, and it is the standard for storing dates and times. UTC starts at Greenwich Mean Time, which is considered UTC 0. From there, every time zone in the world is an offset from UTC 0, or GMT. UTC is 0, but the central time zone is UTC minus 6. Dataverse stores all date and time values as UTC. Sometimes there's a conversion to UTC, and other times there is not. Let's start with how data is stored. When you add a date-time column to a table, the advanced option settings allow you to choose if you want the data to be stored as user local or time zone independent. User local is the default. Time zone independent means store this value as the exact date and time I submitted. It will make no calculations in the storage layer. User local tells Dataverse that the submitted time is coming from a user's local time, and it needs to be converted to UTC to store it. This is done by using the submitting user's time zone, also known as the UTC offset value. In this example, I'm sending January 1st, 2022 midnight. My time zone is PST, which is 8 hours behind UTC. To change my local time to UTC, Dataverse needs to make a conversion. Dataverse will calculate using the inverse of my UTC offset. This converts the date time into the correct UTC value. In my case, it adds 8 hours, so the stored time is January 1st, 2022, 8 a.m. So why does this happen? Because in Dataverse, if the column is set to user local, it triggers logic that says, I'm submitting a user local time, I need to convert it to UTC before storing it. The calculation applies the inverse of the offset, so submitted time with a UTC of minus 8 requires 8 hours to be added to turn it into UTC. Here are examples of what happens when storing date-time values. When storing in a user local column, Dataverse calculates what the true UTC time is based on the submitting user's offset before storing it. If the column is a time zone independent, no calculations occur at all. Now that we've talked about storage, let's talk about submitting the values using the PowerApps UIs. Depending on the field settings, calculations can be made to the date and time before it goes to storage. Model-driven apps use the Dataverse column setting to determine how to display it. There are no special configurations. Canvas, however, provides two options for date-time fields. When you select the date drop-down on a date picker, you'll be able to set the time zone as local or UTC. How this is set will have an impact on how your data is stored. If you're submitting using a model-driven app or a Canvas app set to local, no calculations are applied when submitting the date time. In Canvas app, local is the default setting. Selecting UTC in Canvas results in the Canvas app making a calculation before the data gets sent to storage. When using UTC, the UI determines the user's time zone offset and then applies that offset to the time. In this example, if I submit January 1st, 2022 midnight, it will use my time zone offset of minus 8 to subtract 8 hours before setting it to be stored, resulting in a value of December 31st, 2021, 4 p.m. So why does this calculation happen? When you select UTC in a Canvas app, what it's telling the app is, I'm sending you a value that is a UTC value. To store it, Canvas uses the user's time zone offset to calculate the submitted value into the UTC equivalent for the user's local time. So in my case, I submitted a date in Canvas using UTC. Canvas gets my time zone offset from my profile, in my case minus 8, and then applies that to the submitted UTC value so it is stored as the UTC calculated value. Here are side-by-side examples of what happens when submitting data to different columns. If a Canvas app submits a UTC value to a user local column, the Canvas UI applies the offset to change the value to adjust to the submitter's time zone. So in PST it says, if this is a UTC value, I need to subtract 8 to store the correct time. Then Dataverse gets the submitted data and sees that it's a user local column, and it performs a calculation because it thinks it was submitted a value that is in local time and needs to convert it back to UTC. In this case, 8 hours are added back before it's stored. If a UTC field is submitted to time zone independent, the UI calculation is applied, and then the value is stored as submitted. Now let's see what happens when the values are retrieved. Within Dataverse, if a column is time zone independent, no calculations are made. If the column is user local, the viewing user's UTC offset will be applied. The UI performs no additional calculations. So let's see these calculations end to end. First, let's look at the model or canvas local field using a user local Dataverse column. The UI makes no changes and the value is submitted. Dataverse adds 8 to change it to a UTC based on my offset, and when it's retrieved by me, it subtracts 8 to show the value of my time zone. So as you can see, it's displaying as we expect it to. For a local UI submission to a time zone independent column, you can see no calculations are applied at any stage and the value is saved and retrieved as it was submitted. Here we have the behaviors of a Canvas UTC field being submitted to Dataverse. When a UTC field is submitted to user local, first Canvas applies the offset to change the value from UTC to the submitter's calculated UTC offset value, in this case -8. Then, Dataverse adds 8 to change what it thinks is a user local value into UTC. Then, when the value is retrieved from Dataverse, it subtracts the current user's offset to display the value. So what we can see here is the value now shows that it's off by -8 hours. This is because of the extra UTC calculation from Canvas. And if we do the same thing with time zone independent, Canvas makes that UTC calculation before storing, and then you can see with no other calculations, the return value is off by -8. When would you use UTC in Canvas? If your goal is to submit a UTC time that you want to be converted to the user's local time before storing it, then you would use UTC. Otherwise, you should always use local. That was a lot of information, so let's do a recap. If your Dataverse column is time zone independent and your UI is set to local, nothing will be changed when you submit a value. If your Dataverse is user local and your UI is local, Dataverse will convert the time using the inverse of the user's offset. On retrieval, it will apply the UTC offset of the viewing user, and the value is displayed as expected. If your Dataverse is time zone independent and your UI is UTC, the conversion from UTC to the submitter's time offset will be applied before storing the value, and Dataverse will make no change. The retrieved value will be the submitted value with the applied submitting user's offset. If your Dataverse is user local and your UI is UTC, Canvas converts the UTC using the submitter's offset. Dataverse applies the inverse of the submitting user's UTC value. On retrieval, the viewer's UTC offset is applied, but the end result is going to be off by the submitting user's UTC offset. Here's some examples with data provided. I hope this provides a better understanding of DateTime. Check out our other videos to learn more about Dataverse.